Well, me, I'm a little different. I'm a solo practitioner. I have business partnerships with other organizations where, if opportunity is right, we'll work together. But typically, my day to day is, if I'm in Tallahassee, I'm sitting in committees. Honestly, it's not glitz and glamour work, right? It's really sitting down, listening, and understanding process. So my day, for the most part, I would say, to your question, it's different. To your question, it's different based on the type of lobbyist and the type of stuff they're working on, right?
Gotcha.
If you're an educational lobbyist, you're working on policy all day. You can have a day where you're just in committee, listening to bills, you're reading through bills, things like that. I mainly handle appropriations, which end up being contracts in some aspect, right? So my day would be going through some of the budget spreadsheets now to say, okay, what's the priority that the Florida House and Florida Senate have prioritized for the 2025, 2026 year? At the same time, um, finding prospects is be like, okay, which government or which technology or company out there will be impacted by this the most that currently isn't at the table, right? And then for me, from the appropriation standpoint, is selling what I call the return on investment to the taxpayer through the process. So not to sidestep the question, it really depends on where you are in the process. Like right now, we're in week 3 of Florida's legislative process. So it's nothing really happening until the next 2 weeks when the budget allocations come out. So to me, it's more seeing at least what allocations are, what potential opportunities are from these budget silos, and then kind of going from there. So it fluctuates state to state, and even legislature to legislature, or even at the DC level. Everybody's work is different depending on what industry you're actually in, to be honest.
Hey, well, that's actually something new to me. Here in DC, we got Lobbyist Row, what we call it, but I never thought about, certain lobbyists for certain industries or niches, categories that you need to
Yeah.
focus on.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like I do education, I also do energy, right? There's a lot of synergy there because of AI. You need for AI and Chat GPT to work, you need the energy sector, right? But it's also a fact of how do we create the workforce development and also make sure that the kids that are here, the school to prison pipeline, whatever, right? But then there's also a fact of, even when you talk energy, you're talking the environment, right? However, for someone who's worked 30 years in the environmental issues, I can't come in as a lobbyist and say I'm a super expert on the environmental issues if somebody understands the TMDLs, which is the total daily that comes out, like the water, phosphorus, the fertilizers, all the different nutrient requirements that are required there.
Mhm.
Everybody has their own thing. So when you get down to healthcare, it comes down to, in some states, that have what they call a certificate of need, which is the ability for hospitals and nursing homes to increase their beds, right? But that whole regulation and legislation is probably the lobbyists that are working there. They understand it better than someone who's just coming in from the educational sector somewhere else. So it's more, it niches down because as new technologies come in, some things can expand, but it is a point of you want an expert in the field. You just don't want someone who just whatever. My thing with me is I'm more of a not a jack of all trades because I've worked in different silos, but I realize that my biggest thing is helping nonprofits do their job better. So I focus on appropriations, which is essentially government contracting,
Yeah.
because the appropriations, and we'll get into it. The appropriations and the grant process are two different things, or the contracting process are two different things. Because in one aspect, you're you're applying for a contract that's out there. You say, hey, here's a grant. They want to fund. We can apply. My job, I'm actually getting you a contract that nobody else is applying to besides you. So you're actually getting an allocation of money directly to you for your work, and you're not competing against anybody else. So
Mm.
that's totally different from you going to compete for a contract. My job is to say, yeah, government, contract this person. Hey, senator, representative, this is what it is. Here's a benefit to the taxpayers. Here's what the state's currently not doing. Here's how we enhance what we're doing through this program, and go ahead and get you a direct contract. So then essentially not forces, but it tells that state agency or that federal agency, you have to give this person or this organization $1 million because this is what we felt was the right thing to do.
Ooh, come on now. Hey, I hope y'all are seeing how important this lobbyist industry is to the whole ecosystem.